All right. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. We are here today to announce that Connecticut will be moving up its presidential primary from March 4th to February 5th. We are doing this because we believe that Connecticut voters deserve to have their voices heard, and as more and more states were jumping up and leapfrogging over Connecticut, we believe that Connecticut residents were in danger of being disenfranchised in the presidential primaries. So we have decided to join the Super Duper Tuesday to ensure that our voters will have their voices heard. Under our plan, we'll move up just about a month, and we will be joining over 22 states who have moved their primaries to February 5th. We made this decision because we saw that very large states like New York and California and Illinois were moving up their primaries, and we really wanted to ensure that Connecticut voters had a say before the presidential primaries were in essence over with on February 6th. It became very clear that we should do this, and the leadership of the Government Administration and Elections Committee is here to talk about their legislation as well. I'd like to take you back to 2004 to consider the Howard Dean campaign. At that point, when Howard Dean dropped out of the race, 20% of the delegates had been chosen, and literally 80% of the electorate didn't have an opportunity to participate in the primary. I think it's also very important to point out that by December 31st, we will have a very good idea on both sides of the aisle who the winners of the presidential primaries will be. How do we know that? We'll know by who raised the most money, because over the past 20 years, the best indicator of who will win the presidential preference primary is who's raised the most money by December 31st. So our primaries are rapidly going to be over. So I think there's a better way, because we are seeing this huge front-loading of the presidential primaries, and as a country, we have to think about how we can fix this. There are three different plans that have been put out there. One, the Delaware plan has been floated by the Republican National Committee and almost passed at their 2000 convention. Under the Delaware plan, the small states would start the primaries first, gradually leading up to the larger states with bigger populations who would be last. National Association of Secretaries of the State has proposed a rotating regional primary where different regions of the country would vote at different times. I personally support the American plan put out by Fair Vote in Washington, D.C. that allows smaller states with small populations to go first, and gradually there are larger states who begin to participate. This allows more retail politicking, because I really do think that there's a place for door-to-door grassroots campaigning. It benefits the candidates who are not so well financed. But I think the bottom line is this: in order to fix this very front-loaded presidential primary system, which is broken, we have to expand the concept of retail politicking. We also have to reduce the influence of money in the presidential campaigns, and we have to create a more grassroots door-to-door system that respects voters rather than the large check writers. So with that...
Those formulas you're talking about can't happen this year.
No, they can't, unless Congress and the parties decide to act right now.
All you can do is make the kind of modification you're talking about.
That's right. Connecticut didn't start this tidal wave, but we're going to ride it for now. But then I think as a country, we have to really look at fixing how we run our presidential primaries in Connecticut.
Will we still determine who's on the ballot, as in the past, according to our appropriate?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. Now I'd like to introduce Senator Gail Schlossberg, who is the co-chair of the Government Administration and Elections Committee. Senator Schlossberg.
Thank you, Susan, and thank you all for being here. This is for the first time in many, many years, we have a presidential election that's wide open. And people are really interested in finding out who's out there, both Republicans and Democrats. There are a variety of candidates out there. And what has happened historically, and we've seen traditionally, we all know Connecticut tends to be a blue state. And so as a result of that, the presidential the people who are running the candidates don't tend to come to Connecticut. They come to Connecticut to collect their dollars. They come to fundraise. They show up down in southwestern Connecticut, and then they leave. We don't want that to happen here. In this election, we've got a wide open field of candidates that are really exciting on both sides of the aisle. And the residents and the voters of the state of Connecticut deserve to actually hear from them. And we want to hear from them. We want to hear what they have to say, and we want to have our voices heard. If we don't move this presidential primary up, we are in danger of finding out a month late, well, gee, here's what's going on in Connecticut. Again, we'll be overlooked, and we will not have our voices heard, and we won't be able to hear from those candidates. Now, with all of the other states moving up to that February 5th date, we are now in the mix of the candidates. And what we hope to do is then bring those candidates into the state of Connecticut to make Connecticut voters relevant to the whole discussion and to the entire election and bring them forward. This Friday morning, the GAE committee will be having a public hearing starting at 9 a.m. in the Legislative Office Building to hear this proposal. And we want to hear what people have to say. Is this something that they want to see happen? Is this something are there issues here? There are certainly going to be some logistical questions that are going to be asked and raised, and we want to hear from them. So we encourage everyone to please come Friday morning, come and get your voices heard before the GAE committee as to, going forward with this. But I think this is a really important thing for the state of Connecticut and for Connecticut voters to have their voices heard before some other state or states are going to make this decision for us. And I thank the Secretary of State for working together to bring this forward.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What are the logistical questions? If the Secretary's for it, she must figure it's doable.
Now, there are questions such as, okay, the town committee primaries are right now on March 4th. So do we move those up? I think we do. We move them up to February. Otherwise, towns and cities with town committee primaries will have to pay for two different elections. So I think it does make sense to move those up. So there are some calendar issues that we need to talk about.
Why will Connecticut attract more attention by being in a bigger crowd earlier as opposed to being in a smaller crowd later?
You know what? Back in 1995, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, and Maine and Vermont moved their primaries up to March. They had been later. And we did that to create a northeastern regional primary. We thought if all of those states in our area were having primaries, more candidates would come to visit us. And you know what? That didn't turn out to be the case. I've been in discussion with my colleagues in Rhode Island and Massachusetts, the Secretary of State of both of those states, and Rhode Island is looking to move their primary to February 5th, and so is Massachusetts. And they're doing that because the reality is the race will be over by the time we were voting in March. As a matter of fact, I think it's going to be over on February 6th. So we understand it doesn't completely fix that problem. And there's even been a suggestion that perhaps we move the primary prior to February 5th. But here's the problem with that. Both on the Republican side and the Democratic side, we bump up against national committee rules so that if we move before February 5th, we would lose the opportunity to seat our entire delegations going to both parties' national conventions.
What year did you say that was?
1995. I was chair of GAE when we did that.
But this is still all about delegates. And when you have New York and New Jersey the same day as Connecticut, they both have ton more delegates in both parties than we have.
They sure do. We're not, unfortunately, I don't think this is going to completely fix the issue of having candidates visit our state. I think they'll still visit, as Senator Schlossberg has pointed out, to fundraise, but we wanted to try to ensure that at least Connecticut voters were voting when it means something. We have 7 delegates, you're right.
So you think that when they fundraise, they might make the extra effort to have a public event?
We sure hope so. We sure hope so.
7 delegates for the Dems? No, you're talking about electoral votes.
7 electoral
Yeah, we're
votes.
talking about delegates to the convention. That's what this is all about.
That's right.
That hasn't even been determined.
No, and I wanted to bring up Senator Meyer to say a few words.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Go Connecticut! We are one of the original colonies, and it's about time that we got into the presidential primaries. What a difference we can make. I feel that with our 60-some delegates, that Senator Obama and Senator Clinton, Rudy Giuliani, John McCain, I think they'll be walking our streets. I think they'll be in our diners. I think we're going to have a chance to see them. We're going to have a chance to participate. And the political analysts tell us that the most important presidential election in decades will be 2008. That the future of this country, the direction of this country, with respect to health care, with respect to education, with respect to tax reform, all the kind of big issues are going to be there. I just left a meeting on the shoreline this morning in which we were told on health care issues that we'll have to wait until the next president of the United States is elected to have any real change in health care. Now, in Connecticut, we're trying to do something about it. But on a national level, the next president of the United States will make all the difference. And the fact that we in Connecticut are going to participate in that process is very exciting. And I just thank the Secretary of State for her initiative here. I'm vice chair of GAE committee and look forward to working with Senator Schlossberg in making this a reality come this Friday. Thanks.
And I'd also like to invite Andy Sauer of Common Cause to say a few words.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. And thank you, Senators Schlossberg and Meyer and Joyce Hamilton from Democracy Works. We're very excited about this. Connecticut Common Cause for a long time has been troubled by the growing irrelevance of our state in presidential politics. I think last August and this past election, Connecticut got a taste of what it was like to be sort of the center of attention in elections, and I think that's a good thing for the state. I think that's good. It encourages voter participation. It gets people excited about elections. As Senator Myers said, this coming election will probably be the most important presidential election this nation has seen in decades, and it would be hard to stomach the fact that Connecticut voters didn't mean anything, didn't have a voice in selecting who the representative, who the nominee of their party should be. So Connecticut Common Cause would like to thank the Secretary of the State, Susan Bysiewicz, for spearheading this effort. We applaud it and we support it completely.
Now, we had invited both representatives of the Democratic Party, and I see Justin Kronholm back there, so I'd invite you to ask him questions related to any DNC rules, and also we invited Chris Healy, and I can't see him beyond the okay, and perhaps he'll show up. Are there any other questions? Yep. Yes, they would. They would. Any other questions? Yes.
Do you have guarantees from both houses and the governor's office that this would pass without a problem?
You know, we don't have any kind of guarantee. I can tell you that in 1995, when we did this, people on both sides of the aisle were very excited about it, and I think this helps both parties get their message out and bring candidates to our state. So I've not heard any opposition, but we'll listen at the public hearing on Friday.
Senator Meyer indicated that Friday, you're going to committee vote on Friday?
Public hearing.
Public
Just a
hearing.
public hearing.
And a vote.
And a vote.
And a vote.
Well, you're anticipating, you must have tested the minds of some of your members. You were anticipating it's going to pass.
I can speak to that.
Sure.
Yeah, actually, we have spoken to a number of the members, and people are very excited about this on both sides of the aisle, that it really does give us an opportunity to have a voice. And so I haven't heard any opposition within the committee, and people are excited about it.
Do you think you can get it out fast and pass it fast?
That's the hope.
These wheels can start turning.
That's what we're hoping to do.
Because they have to do a municipal election this fall and then get ready for this, because it would only be 2 or 3 months later.
That's
That's
right.
right.
That's right.
Once the holidays and everything.
The turnaround is very quick.
Has Senator Dodd's campaign been contacted? He is, after all, a favorite son, even though the opinion polls...
We did run it by Senator Dodd's campaign, and he was very excited to have the primary moved up because, if you notice, the other states like Illinois, New York, and others are home states of presidential candidates. So he was pleased that Connecticut was thinking about it.
So you make clear that within the existing landscape, this is probably the best Connecticut can do to have its votes be relevant.
That's right.
But how do you feel in general about this, this trend that's gone on for years now that seems to be intent on picking the nominees of both parties almost a year in advance?
And I think that our system of choosing presidential candidates is broken, and I call on Congress and both of our parties to fix it. I think that we need more time to fully listen to all of the candidates. I hate to see a system that benefits the rock star candidates or the well-funded candidates, which our system does. And I'd like to see the opportunity to have more candidates out there at the grassroots level campaigning, and I'd like the opportunity for candidates to visit every state, not just the ones that have the most delegates.
Talking about that there's problems in this, problems with it being too short, then why participate in the problem? I mean, isn't it,
You know, it's a catch-22, because if we stay where we are when all these other states have jumped over us, then our voters don't have the opportunity to participate. And at least we can have a shot of having some of the presidential candidates visit our state. That's the reality. We didn't start the tidal wave, but when we saw California, Illinois, and New York and other states jumping forward, I immediately started calling my Secretary of the State colleagues in Rhode Island and Massachusetts, Vermont, and Maine and said, hey, can we think about a regional primary? And we talked about February 12th, but by that point, there were states that had joined the February 5th fray, and we said, you know what, we'll go to the 5th.
when was that? When did you
Right after California, so mid to end of last week, I started having conversations, and I know Ralph Mollis in Rhode Island is supporting legislation to move the primary to the 5th, and Secretary Galvin in Massachusetts is looking at this, hoping to move Massachusetts up.
You said the system is broken. You don't think John Kerry and Al Gore were good candidates?
I do think I think they were both great candidates. To get to your question about Vermont and Maine, Vermont is leaving their date in March because they have local elections every March. So they are concerned about the expense. They don't like, being a month after the fact, but the expense part is their biggest consideration. And Maine has their caucuses on the 10th. So they're going to leave them there.
Chris is here. Chris, how many delegates does your party have?
I think we're up to about 17 now. We didn't have a good fall, so we lost some delegates. So.
Oh, darn.
Yeah, oh, darn. Yeah. It's all right, I'll give you the White House passes in 08 answers.
Justin, how many Democratic delegates are there? 60 plus?
Actually, I'm sorry, Mark. I think we're a little bit over. I'll get you a number, but I think it's like 21 when you include all the super delegates.
Oh, right.
17 on rank, and then we.
So it's about 20.
Yeah, a little bit.
And how do you feel in general about the idea of moving it up?
I support it. We have, I think.
Why don't you step to the podium, Chris?
I don't want to tower over the secretary. I
Height
think
isn't everything.
No, height isn't everything. That's what they say. Actually, I just to echo some of the comments on the RNC side, the Republican side, we've entertained a couple of reform ideas. One being, as you know, is the Delaware plan, which sought to group states into areas so that candidates could make best use of their time and talk about issues. A lot of them are regional in nature, and a lot of them are having to do with parts of the country that I think need to hear where the candidates speak, and of course vet the process. Sadly, what we're turning into now is basically two election dates. One now in February now, and one in November. But that's unfortunately the way the water is rising. So we need to play in that, since, as I'm sure the Madam Secretary said, Connecticut is often seen as the ATM for both the Republican and Democratic parties, and we love giving them our money, but we'd like to give them our thoughts and our ideas and debate the issues. I wish there was a way that we could somehow over time, but both national committees could work out something that would really serve all the interests of the voters of this state, because it's important that both parties have an opportunity, obviously, not only to vet their candidates, but as I think the Madam Secretary has said, that one of the best, most productive parts of party building occurs during the primary season when we get to add voters. I can tell you from personal experience in 2000, we added many Republicans because of the McCain-Bush event. I could tell you from personal experience on the U.S. Senate side, and I know my good friend Joe Courtney thanks the fact that the U.S. Senate campaign registered many Democrats. So that's all good. In fact, it gets us back into a more vibrant party structure. So hopefully this will at least get us in the game, but there has to be some real long-term, I guess the ultimate national conference or national commission would probably be the best way to go about it.
Right, and it's going to take leadership not only by both parties, but also by Congress to fix not only the primary scheduling issue, but also the campaign finance component of it as well. Anything else? Well, thank you all for coming.